Okay, this is open Q&A, so you have a question? Yeah.
Why do some communities not pray for Ukraine and then some do?
I don't know. I haven't been keeping track of it, but I do know a little bit about the history of Ukraine in terms of anti-Semitism, which is really quite bitter.
I mean, like I understand praying for, like, I guess political, like you don't want to pray for the state of Israel. That's a young Israel thing versus a Haredi thing. But I'm saying, like, or sometimes I go to people and they're just like, why we should do a mission for the Jews of Ukraine. They should be safe. And some kehillas they do, and some kehillas they don't.
Yeah, wasn't the question you asked. You asked. Now you're talking about the Jews of Ukraine. Okay, that's a different thing.
I mean, the Jews of Ukraine.
I don't know. I don't know what the rules are for doing this sort of thing. I really don't know where the rules come from. Someone said, you want to pray about Jews who are in danger? Why not pray for all the Jews who are suffering from cancer? As a group, they're in more danger than any of the groups you mentioned. More of them are going to die. They're suffering right now. So, but we don't do that somehow. Why don't we do that? I don't know. It's not an obvious answer. It's only for the political and slick psychological nonsense, and prejudice and all that. It's a question of what and what conditions you pray for a specific group. We pray for the Jewish people all the time. And we say that after we say Tillim in the morning, for all Jews who are in danger anywhere. I should pick these out and not pick out other Jews who are in danger. Why would you do that? I mean, it's not an obvious thing. Obviously, yeah. This is Q&A. Yeah.
Don't we say Rafa'inu though?
Hmm?
Also, don't we say, like, the example you gave was cancer, so we say Rafa'inu as well.
Right, but we don't pick out a specific group and say cancer. Right? And what about people who have kidney failure? What about people who are suffering from infectious diseases? We didn't have special prayers for corona patients. No one made special prayers for Jews that are suffering from corona. Huh? So the idea of picking out a special group, we pray for all Jews everywhere, and that includes all the people who are in trouble in various categories. You can add privately to your own prayers whatever you want, in any language that you want. So you want to put them in because you feel somehow especially attached to them, but to do it communally is not an obvious thing to do.
Makes sense to add it at the points that it's relevant, or only at Shmakulin?
Okay, so the Gemara actually asked that question. There was a city somewhere here in the Middle East in the summertime which was short of water, and it doesn't rain for 6, 7, 8 months here. So it's only in the winter. So they asked the question of Yerushalayim, when shall they ask for rain for their community? In Birchas Hashanim, we're asking for general physical support, or in Shomei Tefillah. Now, Shomei Tefillah works like this. There you're asking that your requests be fulfilled. That's totally general. It has no specific content whatsoever. Whatever the requests are, they should be fulfilled. So anything that doesn't come under the categories of the specific categories can be put into Shomei Tefillah. And the answer they got back was, since no other community, Jewish community needs rain now, so you can't say, the Jews need rain and we're also Jews, please give us rain, because it's not true. Then put it under Shomei Tefillah. So that would be the place for, it's the catch-all for things that don't come under the general categories that other Jews need.
What's the significance of Matzah during Passover?
It's a big subject. Matzah and Pesach is a big subject. I'll tell you one idea. You can read thousands of pages on that subject. First of all, the Gaon of Vilna points out, based on Kabbalistic sources, and by the way, in case you didn't know, the Gaon of Vilna was a great Kabbalist. any lingering prejudices and associating Kabbalism with the Chassidim, who are only second-class citizens, and so on and so on. You should outgrow that. Okay. He points out that the shapes of the letters in Hebrew also carry significance. Not just the order in the alphabet and the numerical value, but even the shapes of the letters. For example, the word sukkah, spelled samach chaf hey, where the u is just 3 dots of the 3 main letters, are the shapes of kosher sukkahs. The samach is totally enclosed with 4 walls, the chaf has 3 walls, and the hey has 2 walls and a spitz. And that is a third type of kosher sukkah. So he made the following observation. Take the 2 words, chametz and matzah. Both those words have the letters mem tzadi in them. The difference is that chametz begins with a ches and then has mem tzadi. Matzah starts with mem tzadi and then has a hey. So the difference between them is that chametz has a ches and matzah has a hey. We're going to look at it pictorially. If I have a hay, and I take this spitz over here and grow it, let it swell, let it rise, what happens? Well, it rises until it hits the roof of the dalet, and then you get a ches. So a ches is really a risen hay. If you rise the leg of the hay, it grows into a ches. Okay, now here's an interesting halacha. The exact same grains that can become chametz if they ferment are the grains that are matzah if they don't ferment. It's the exact same species. So, chametz, and by the way, if you don't do anything, grains naturally have some yeast on them. You make a dough and leave it alone, it will rise. You can add yeast and it will rise faster and perhaps more, but it will rise on its own. So you can look at matzah as frustrated chametz. You took grain and you made a dough out of it. If you left it alone, it would rise. But you don't leave it alone. You punch it down and you roll it, you bake it quickly, and therefore it didn't get to rise, which others would have done. The letters of chametz and matzah show this pictorially. Matzah with a hay, where the spitz is disconnected from the top, and then chametz is where you let that rise, and when it rises, it reaches the top and becomes a ches. Now, what's the inner message, or an inner message? I shouldn't say the inner message. An inner message. There's a big difference between matzah and chametz. If you had never seen bread, and somebody hands you a loaf of bread, and you take it into your hands, you'd be immediately surprised by how light it is. It's like 50% air, as you know. If you take a slice of bread and squeeze it down, you can make it much, much smaller. Like 50% air. It looks like it's much more substance than it is. Sort of like Bamba, right? It's mostly air. With matzah, what you see is what you get. There's no false appearance of substance in matzah. It is only what it is. Well, there is something in the world which is in danger of impressing us by a false substance that it has, a false solidity, a false strength that it has. And one of the messages of Pesach is not to be taken in by that false appearance. This item of the world which carries this danger is what's called nature. Specifically, that there are laws of nature, that is cause and effect. The world looks like it carries itself. Why is this table here? Because it was here yesterday and nobody disturbed it. That's why. Leave it alone, it'll be here till the Mashiach comes. Somebody could disturb it, you could burn it, you could break it, you could move it out, you could throw it away. But if leave it alone, it'll just sit there all by itself. Which has 2 meanings. It means nobody else around. It means nobody needs to support it. Nobody needs to keep it in existence. It just stays there because it was there, a kind of inertia of existence, unless somebody interferes with it. The sun rises because the earth rotates on its axis and gives the appearance of the motion of the sun. And the rotating on the axis is something that physical bodies do unless you interfere with them. You put a raw egg into boiling water, and 7 minutes later it comes out solid because heat applied to a raw egg in that way turns the liquid inside into a solid. You take for granted that this carries itself. Of course it doesn't. Nothing carries itself. Anything that exists from moment to moment does so only because God's will is making it exist from moment to moment. Nothing has inertia of existence. Nothing just is here because it was here before and nothing interfered with it. But it doesn't look that way. No scientist has discovered this, not with microscopes or with telescopes or with Fourier models for series for statistical analysis. No one has discovered it. The world looks like it is carried by nature. That's utterly false. We say it twice every morning after Baruch Hu. Achadesh, Tomid, Ma'aser Bereishis. God makes anew the work of creation continuously, all the time. Now, one of the things that Pesach has to teach us is that by observing with our eyes, superficially, we don't get the truth of what's going on. I want to give you a kind of impression as to what it was like to live in Egypt. The Jews were there for 210 years, about 90 years of slavery. 90 years of slavery is approximately 3 generations. People were born there, into slavery, lived as slaves, and died. Moses arrives and says, guess what? It's going to be over. You're going to be rescued. God of our ancestors is going to come, is going to break the Egyptian power and set us free. Most of the Jews who heard that could not relate to it. 80% of the Jews died in the 3 days of darkness in the 9th plague. Their attitude was, I remember what you're talking about. Those were the bedtime stories they used to tell me to help me fall asleep when I was 5 years old. Yeah, they were lovely bedtime stories, but that's not real. That's not real. What's real is Egypt, the Egyptian army, the Egyptian taskmasters, the quotas that we have to fulfill with the work, the whippings that we get as slaves. That's real. Egypt fights international wars. Egypt has an empire. That's real. You're telling us fairy stories from childhood. The plagues were meant to break that false understanding, that misunderstanding. Commentators say the plagues weren't designed to get us out of Egypt. If that was the purpose of the plagues, God would have started with the death of the firstborn. We would have been over in one night. No. In addition to teaching the Egyptians the basics of the fact that God runs the world, the Jews also had to be taught. Some Jews got it and some Jews didn't get it. They didn't get it because they were hypnotized by the Egyptian power, the Egyptian culture, the Egyptian politics. That was reality on a day-by-day basis. The stories of God and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they weren't real to them. They just weren't real. The truth is that the stories of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is much more real. Egypt is like a feather floating in the wind. The real foundations of the world are in the stories of the patriarchs. They couldn't see that. They couldn't hear that. You talk to Jews today, even Jews who pledge allegiance to the system and who keep the commandments, what's going to happen in this country, what kind of economic policy should we have here, and so forth and so on. They'll enter into a discussion with you, some of them with a lot of general knowledge and a lot of sophistication, and there won't be one Jewish source quoted. Not one. Not one. They're predicting what's going to happen on the basis of this economic theory and that political theory and that social theorist and so forth and so on. What are you doing? What are you talking about? I'm not recommending ignoring the information that we can get from the natural world, but to rely only on that is insanity. It doesn't carry itself. It's being carried by another power altogether. So this, in particular, with the idea of nature, that's the idea of the false solidity. When you look at a loaf of bread, and you think of it as substance, instead of realizing that it's mostly air, that's when you're being taken in by the illusion. Matzah, you're not taken in by that illusion. There isn't such illusion. It all is what you see. What you see is what you get. And that's the model for this rethinking and refocusing on the idea that it's really a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's providence that maintains the existence of everything. The so-called laws of nature are just the repetitive ways in which he manages the universe. He puts the repetition in it. It's not there all by itself. Nothing's there all by itself. So that's one of the things that you learn from meditating on the matzah that you eat and the chametz you don't eat. One of the many. Yeah, what's noch?
We just had Parshat Zachar that talks about destroying Amalek. Men, women, children, the livestock, so on, totally everything. The first obvious question would be what about the children who didn't do anything wrong? So, like the answer that I heard from other Rabbeim was that was like the baby Hitler scenario kind of that this person's going to grow up to do terrible things, and so like it would be totally unethical to allow him to continue living and to be able to do that. But then you have a lot of cases, like a lot of scenarios, like someone like Yishmael, and like Hashem would say in that case, Asher Hashem. So why in this case by Amalek do we don't say that?
The Maharsha asked this question. It's a good question. Maharsha asked it because in Ben Sora Amora, where you kill the boy because he later is going to become a thief and going to put people in danger because he needs to get what he's addicted to, and you kill him, the Mishnah Sanhedrin says, kill him while he's still innocent, while he hasn't done anything yet, because of what he's going to do in the future. And the Maharsha asked the question from Yishmael about Shehusham, and he says there's a difference between this person's own personal future versus future generations. By Shehusham with Yishmael, it said that in future generations are going to oppress and torture Jews. We don't punish a person on the basis of what future generations are going to do. But what this person himself will do in his own personal future, we do. That's the condition.
Yishmael personally wasn't such a bad person?
First of all, the complaint was that we see in the future that if he's left to live, his future generations will do this. That's what it says. That's what the complaint was, word for word. I'm not guessing. But as a matter of fact, Yishmael did tshuva. He died at tzaddik. So in fact, one of the reasons why Avraham Avinu was so upset when Sarah said to kick him out was that he knew he was going to do tshuva. So he says, yeah, he's doing bad things right now, but it's temporary. He's going to outgrow it.
So why was it so imperative to kick him out?
Because at the time, number one, the question of the influence that he would have on Yitzchak, who was very young, and number two, he needed a jolt. If you don't attend to the failures of a person, you don't make him pay for them, you just reinforce him. And he says, well, nobody's opposing me, so it must be okay. Now, he needed, by the way, it's very interesting. Avram kicks him out. Now, when it comes to the Akedah, because Baruch Hu says to Avram, Kach na'as bincha, take your son. The Medrash says, I have two sons. Asher havta, I love both of them. Right? Just a minute, you kicked him out. Right? Didn't you learn the lesson? He's a problematic child, and so on and so on. So it's a Medrash, an unbelievable Medrash. says Avram kicked him out, but he kept track of him. He kept track of him. And in particular, he sent shlichim, agents, to check on how he's doing. He sent one shliach who came to Ishmael's house. Ishmael wasn't home, but his wife was home, and he asked her for some kind of help, whether it was food or whatever it was, and she ignored him. So he came back to Avram and said, that's the reception I got in Ishmael's house. I sent a message to Ishmael, your wife isn't worthy of you, get rid of her. And he did. Then he remarried. He sent another shliach who went to the house, and the wife treated him well. Came back and gave him that message. And then Avraham Avinu invited Ishmael to return. And he returned, and he came home on the day of Kachno Espincha. The day he came home, because Baruch Hu said, take your son. So he said, I have two sons. I love them both. That's when he already done tshuva. And that answers that question. It's a beautiful measure.
If Amalek was so bad, then why are they allowed to convert? If they're so bad and they're unforgivable for what they've done, and why are they allowed to convert, and why were they able to become Ben Torah later on? Haman's descendants were.
Yeah. You stated it well. You put the hypothesis at the beginning of the sentence, but the hypothesis is false. If you take a look in the Rambam, Hilchos Malachim, Perek Vav, you will see he says, "Ein osim nechama im adam ba'olam, elohim came korin lo l'shalom tchila." You have to offer peace to anyone and everyone before you make war on them. And he explicitly names Amalek and the 7 nations who held Eretz Yisrael. All of them, you offer peace first. So they aren't irredeemably bad. They aren't so polluted that they can't be saved and so on and so on. If they would turn around and accept the peace terms that we'd offer them, we wouldn't kill any of them.
So when Shaul was supposed to kill them all,
He offered them peace.
they were allowed to convert at that point, or not even convert. Were they allowed to just say we don't want to fight and leave? No, he had to kill every single man, woman, and child.
Again, it depends upon what their response is. The offer that you give them in Hilchos Malachim is that you have to accept the seven mitzvot b'nei Noach. If you're living in Eretz Yisrael, you have to be a second-class citizen. You have to serve the Jews who are there. If not. But you have to accept the seven mitzvot b'nei Noach. No goy has the right to violate those. Creator said he has to do them.
They violated the.
Again, you're jumping out of the point. You make a proposal, and they say yes or no. I don't care what they do. They say yes or no to the proposal. If they say yes, you make peace with them, and then they have to follow the proposal. If they say no, then you kill them. So it is not true that they're irredeemable, that they're polluted, that they're evil, and nothing. If they themselves will turn around, then we will. Now he says, we don't make a war against even an individual. So let's say someone comes 300 years later, he comes from Amalek, and he says, I believe in the Torah, I want to be a Jew. Of course you accept him. Why not? There is no mitzvah to check people's DNA, and if he's got Amalek DNA, to shoot him on the spot. There is no such mitzvah. Yeah.
What's the significance of beards?
I don't know exactly. Chabad put out a whole sefer on this. Tzuras Apanim, I think. Tzuras. But I do know this one thing, that this I saw in the Ben Yehoyada. Ben Yehoyada asks, why is it that men grow long hair, and I'm sure he included payas, and beards, and women, now this must have been his custom in his community, and others have a similar custom, women cut off all their hair. Our married women cut off all their hair. And he said, because hair is din. Din means something which constricts, blocks, limits. Imagine that each hair is a tube through which something has to be communicated. But each hair is extremely thin, extremely constricting. That's one of the things that din does. Din blocks flow. Now, in general, the foundation of a man is chesed, which is loving kindness. Loving kindness and din can work together because they trade off from one another. So a man can afford to grow hair because that's his expression of din coming from him whose foundation is loving kindness. Well, a woman's foundation is din. And since it's a foundation of din, it's too much din. It's too much. It reinforces. It's one-dimensional and self-reinforced. So that's why they can't have it. So the beard represents flow. It represents flow from the upper to the lower. In the partsufim of the olamos, that's where the flow comes from the head, where the intellectual faculties are, down to the rest of the body, where the other faculties of the human being are. So that's roughly what the beard. And therefore, according to the Zohar, it would be good not to cut your hair. Period.
I've been to Haredi yeshivas where they say, and these are people who, while they're learning a lot and they're learning hard, they're 18, 19, and it's the custom of the yeshiva that they do shave.
In Europe, that was very widespread, and I haven't been there.
Keep their payas, obviously keep their payas. They have very long sideburns, and they all have hats, but they shave.
So I wasn't there. What I have heard about it, and you should ask other people because either I could be wrong or it could be that there's other things in addition, is that growing a beard is like taking for yourself a certain status. And you don't want a 17-year-old to take that status for himself. He's not ready for it. In fact, I think it's Rabbi Perlman in the Mir 1,000,000 years ago, well, it's only 900,000 years old. He asked special permission to grow a beard. An American, and Chaim Shmulevitz gave him that permission. But it's a question of a kind of status that it. Now, it's very interesting. Rabbeinu Tam, the tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam. There are two pairs of tefillin. Some people put on two. Sephardim put them on simultaneously. Ashkenazim put them on one after the other. The Mechaber in the Shulchan Aruch says it's not a good idea. Mechzeki Yehura. It looks like religious pride. You put on tefillin? You don't put on tefillin. I put on two tefillin. 2 pairs. You know how much it costs? You're just fooling around. You're not doing the real thing, right? It looks like religious pride that you're doing something so outstanding, and pride kills you spiritually. Now, there's a way to solve that problem. Inaugurate it for the whole group all at one time. So the wagon driver is also doing it. So the person who sews clothes is also doing it. Then it won't look like pride, because everybody at every level of society is doing it. That's what the Sephardim did. That's what certain Chassidic groups do. Everybody works for Rabbeinu Tam Shlomo. But you hear the sensitivity. What is it going to do to your midos? What is it going to do to your psychology? What's it going to do to your self-perception? There are a lot of statements in the tradition which deal with this subject, and you have to sort of be aware that the subject in order to appreciate it. In Derech Eretz Zuta, which is one of the minor Masechtos, it says, when people are standing, don't sit. When people are sitting, don't stand. When people are laughing, don't cry. When people are crying, don't laugh. Why not? Why not? I'm doing my own thing. Right. You're doing your own thing. And your thing is different from everybody else's thing. How do you feel about that? Do you feel inferior? Do you feel maybe superior? You know something they don't know. You're seeing something they don't see. Then you look at them with pity because they're not on your wavelength where you know better, so forth and so on. Being different from everybody else can be a tremendous psychological challenge. Challenge for your midos. This kind of internal psychological analysis is a very important part of Yiddishkeit. And because it's not popular philosophically today, very few people engage in it. I shouldn't say that. It depends now. I was surprised to learn a year ago that every frum girl in the United States has a therapist. Every one. You must have a therapist. Otherwise, your life is not a life. It's just not a life. My wife runs a seminary. She has 80 girls. Every one of them has a therapist. Every one. To me, when I was growing up, I couldn't spell therapist. Now, I don't think the boys are in the same situation as the girls are. So they maybe they are looking and analyzing this sort of thing. But I know in philosophy it's very rare.
What does it mean that they? What does it mean that they have a therapist? Is that like a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What do you mean by that?
They all employ professional therapists. They meet with them once a week, go to therapy sessions. Their parents pay, I don't know, $250 a session or something to help them deal with life and help them grow up in the best possible way and help them manage their relationship with their parents and their siblings and the challenges in life and their fears and so on and so on. And without a therapist, your life just isn't going to work.
In which community?
My wife gets girls from all over the United States and Canada and England, and every one of them has a therapist.
I thought you have a negative view towards therapists.
I'm sorry?
I thought you have a negative view towards therapists.
Why do I have such a negative view?
No, I
can't.
Rabbi has a negative view towards psychologists and therapists.
That I do?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I've read some amount of works in psychology, and I've seen the results of some types of therapy. I've read the writings of contemporary practicing therapists where they explain what they're doing. Look, I'm trained in philosophy and in logic. And from my point of view, there's a lot missing there. A lot missing there. A lot. Not to mention the phases that psychology goes through. This is the latest thing, the newest thing, and it lasts about 15 years until they discover it's no good. And then, I remember two from my childhood. One was parents were instructed or advised to be a friend to your children, be a pal to your children. So you have the family meeting where decisions are taken by vote. So you have the 42-year-old father, the 38-year-old mother, and then the 14-year-old, the 11-year-old, the 9-year-old, and the 7-year-old. And then you have 6 votes. And then the 7-year-old's opinion counts as much as the 42-year-old's opinion. Excuse me, that's nuts. That's nuts.
Discover.
As one mother said to her daughter, I have been 19, but you have not been 45. So we're not in the same position, you see. I have a lot more that I can use to make my judgments than you can. I've lived a lot more of life than you have. Give them equal votes. And the other thing I remember was it's self-destructive to bottle up your emotions inside you, and especially anger is very, very destructive. If you feel angry, express it. Get it out. Say it, and do it in such a way that you feel you've got it off your chest, and you've made your that way you'll take off the pressure and so on and so on. That lasted about 15 years. It took 15 years to discover that the angry behavior reinforces the emotion of anger. Doesn't dissipate it, doesn't relieve the pressure. If you're yelling, then you feel you're justified in being angry and you become more angry. You don't feel less angry. When you have a cycle between psychology and behavior, a reinforcing cycle, the way you break the cycle is by stopping the behavior. You can't reach inside directly and poke your emotions to change them, but if you stop the behavior, which is reinforcing the emotions eventually will dissipate. So I've seen this sort of thing with Freud, who was the big gun for a while. He said things which they don't want to tell you, they don't want to remember. But two of his great insights were he was part of a school that believed in traumas. Childhood traumas are responsible for adult psychological problems. Well, when they looked at people with problems, and they checked their childhood, there weren't enough traumas to go around. So you had to fill the gap, right? So then they invented the birth trauma. Everybody's got that one, right? Well, not if it's a C-section, but everybody else is born normally, goes through the narrow canal and squeezed out, and then it comes out into the light and held upside down, and you give a bang, and it's cold. And so that birth trauma can be responsible for whatever happens to you later. And Freud added the circumcision trauma. Obviously, the kid cries, right? So obviously it's a trauma. Let me tell you something. When you'll have children and you'll watch them, and what they do, the crying at a bris is very minor. I remember diaper needles. Diapers were cloth, and you used needles to pin them. And once I missed, and I hit the child's leg. The screaming was much worse than the bris. And if bris is a trauma, what about colic? You know what colic is? A baby can cry for 2 weeks straight, morning, afternoon, evening, night. He's crying all the time. They may heard of the colic trauma. Now somehow they left that one out. This kind of stuff, that's bad enough. What's even worse was Freud's position that women are clearly just immature men. Look, when babies are born, male and female, you can't tell the difference. If you don't look under the diaper, you can't tell whether it's a boy or a girl, right? Now they grow. They grow up, they become heavier, taller, they grow hair, their voices drop. Men grow to a certain size, and their voices drop and they grow hair. Women grow, but they stop growing, and their voices don't drop as much, and they don't grow as much hair. So clearly they're just immature men. You see it in the biology. Does that convince you? I hope not. Right? You have to have 20 times as much testosterone to really be a developed, mature human being. The women are missing all the testosterone. Boy, are they deprived. You know, you couldn't sell that today, rightfully so. You read this stuff and you think, this is what people think is great genius? This is what people... Now, that's not to say he didn't make good observations and discover things, but he made so many mistakes. There was a guy called Eric Byrne, and he wrote a book called Games People Play, what they call transactional analysis. If you talk to a psychologist, maybe they'll remember that. And I remember the last chapter he's talking about what's now a big deal, mindfulness. And mindfulness is being in the moment. So he said, a guy who's driving his car in New England on his way to work in the fall with the trees in glorious color, and all he can think about is what's going to happen in the office. So then he's not living in the moment. He's not experiencing what's in front of him. And that person is out of touch with real life and real perception, real feeling, and, so on and so on, right? I thought to myself, oh yeah? Let's suppose he's driving to the courthouse where he's on trial for his life. Suppose he's going to testify today. He's planning in his mind what he should say, so it'll be as good as possible. Should he pay attention when Eric Byrne taps him on the shoulder and says, pay attention to the trees? He said, no, thank you. I'd like to live for the next 10 years. I don't want to be executed. I'd rather think about what the testimony is. Why isn't this moment the moment of preparing for the trial? And I'm living in the moment of preparing for the trial. Why isn't that part of the moment? It's just a lot of the stuff is slipshod prejudice and there's another therapist who became famous, wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled, quoting Robert Frost. And he writes in that book that if he had a female, I don't know, they don't call him patient anymore, client or whatever, right? And he felt that having sexual relations with her would be good for her psychology, he would do it. That's hair-raising. That's hair-raising. He doesn't realize that he's an interested party and he's not going to be able to make a rational decision whether he should do that or not. And he's a psychologist. So there's a lot going on there that's, you don't find mistakes like that in physics or in chemistry or in mathematics or, So I'm very suspicious. I'm very suspicious of it. I have a lot of other things that bother me, but this is, having said this much, I'll say one more thing. You need a therapist. The first thing you ought to do is say to the therapist, what are your values? What do you think is important? What are your goals in therapy? What are your general values? Because I know that you're going to use your values in the therapy. If he tells you, Chas v'sholom, I don't do that. I'm value free. I just do it for the interest of the client. I have nothing of my own that I contribute to it. Then he's self-deceived. He's confused. Run. Don't walk. Run. If he's honest enough to say, yes, here are my values. Here's what I want to achieve in therapy. So, for example, you go to a non-religious therapist. Many of them will tell you, my approach to therapy is, if you're religious, that's your basic problem. That's your worst problem. Putting you under pressure, it's leading you to superstition, it's keeping you out of facing the real world. Then we have to get rid of that. That's for sure. And then after that, we can, after we take off all that pressure, then we can talk about your other problems and see what we can do for you. So, if a therapist tells you that, I would say to him, "Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. I'm going elsewhere because that's not what I want from the therapy. I don't want to stop being religious. I want someone to help me live a better religious life. And if you're not prepared to help me with that, then I don't want to." So, but the one who tells you, "I don't do it with values," I have a little test. I'm going to ask the therapist some questions. Person comes to you and he asks for help. And you have three choices. You can decide to help him, do what he wants to be done, or you can decide to try to change what he wants, because that'll be better for him, or you can call the police. Those are your three choices. Now you tell me what you would do in the following cases. Doc, I'm working 90 hours a week. I can't stop. If I work any less, I feel guilty. I know it's ruining my life. I know I don't need the extra money. But I was brought up to think that you have to work. That's how I was trained as a child. And I just can't stop working. Help me work less and not feel guilty. That's case number one. Case number two. I work in a car assembly plant. I install brakes in the cars. It's very boring. It's really very boring. So once in a while, a couple times a week, I put the brakes in backwards. It's much, it creates a little break in the routine. Now, I feel guilty about this because, if the brakes are backwards, they're not going to stop the car. So, Brock, please help me not feel guilty for putting in the brakes backwards. Okay? Third case. I'm married, and I have a very unpleasant marriage. I'm thinking of having an affair, but I've been brought up to feel guilty about doing that. Please help me and enable me to have the affair and not feel guilty. Fourth case. I am a junior vice president in a certain firm. There's another junior vice president. There's a promotion coming up. There's only one of us that can get it. I can insert material into his file without his knowing who's doing it, which will ruin him, so that I will get the promotion. But I know I'm going to feel guilty. Please help me, enable me to insert the material and destroy him without feeling guilty. That's what I want from you as a psychologist. Please do that. And here's the last one. There's a fellow I know named Philip. He's dirt. He's dirt. The world's not big enough for him and me, and he's going to go. I have it planned. I know exactly how to kill him. But Doc, I'm going to feel guilty. So please help me kill him and not feel guilty. Right? All 5 cases, the client is asking for help to be able to do something and not feel guilty. Now, sir therapist, how do you decide whether to help him do it and not feel guilty, or to change what he wants to do, or to call the police? Isn't it on the basis of your values? You bet it's on the basis of your values. Don't tell me that your therapy is value-free. No such thing as value-free. If you do something value-free, then you're not human. You become a squirrel. Of course you're using your values. Then the only honest thing to do is when a person comes to a therapist, say, these are my values. Right? So a person says, you can imagine the answer to this one. I have homosexual desires, and I don't want to be a homosexual. I want to be like the vast majority of the population. No, homosexuals are not 20% of the population, they're not 10% of the population, they're not 5% of the population, they're about 2% of the population. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. I'm the client. I'm telling you what I want. I want to be straight. Help me be straight. Therapist won't do it. He won't do it. Why not? Because his values are that homosexuality is just as good as what we call straight life, and that a person shouldn't be rebelling against his inner feelings, so forth and so on, and therefore he won't do it. So the decision whether to go along with the client's desire for therapy is a decision that's made on the basis of the values of the therapist. If that's the case, if he tells you he's doing value-free therapy, run. Okay, there's more to be said, but I have a lot of the reading that I've done. In some cases, I know of people who are in therapy. There's a lot to be cautious of there. Not that there aren't good people. There are good people, but there's a lot to be cautious of
Did you
there.
have a conversation about this with Rebbitzin? Because she supports it for her seminar.
She uses psychologists, but she has a great critique of psychologists. Great critique of psychologists. Anyway, enough said on that, I think. What's noch? Okay, well, me. Question? No? Huh?
Long question.
We'll try. I have to leave in 10 minutes, 9 minutes.
That's a decent amount of time.
No, it's not enough.
Okay.
Why can't we double knot our shoes on Shabbos?
Well, one of the Lamites Melachos is tying knots, and the definition of a knot is one that needs special skill. The biblical definition needs special skill to tie, and is meant to last more than 24 hours. I believe that's correct. So if it gets tied by accident, it doesn't count. Sometimes when you try to untie your shoes or pull out it gets caught, that doesn't count. But it's like all the other things which I learned from what was done in the Mishkan, and this is one of the things that was used for constructing the Mishkan. So double tie, and it's not just the shoes; it would be double tying it anywhere. So these, what they used to put around the Sefer Torah, what the Yekes call a wimple, and now they use Velcro. So that solved the problem, because otherwise they don't use Velcro?
No.
I've seen it.
Some of them do.
Sure.
Depends on the.
Sure.
Not the one that I see. Mine is just a straight up better.
No. A real wimple, right. That would you wrap it around and then you tuck it in. So there's no, you don't tie anything at all. That's why my point is that they've made things that hold it together without any tie. You don't tie. You don't make a knot of any kind whatsoever. But the old ones used to tie them, and then it was a question of how you're tying it.
The gleeless strap?
Yeah, the glue strap. Yeah.
Oh. When it comes to the knots, what if the one thing is like on Shabbos, they give a head, okay, fine, a single knot is fine, like a bow tie. But the thing is that even if it keeps getting undone, the person will tie it together with the intention that it'll stay knotted throughout the entirety of Shabbos.
Yeah, but it's not it doesn't require any special skill to tie it. Every kid can tie a bow.
But it stays knotted together.
I know, but I said the definition is two things. It needs special skill to do it, and it has to be intend that it should stay knotted for.
Then why is a necktie an issue? Where even though it's a slip knot, I heard that if you can't pull it away from your neck and pull the tongue out with one hand, and you actually have to use two hands, it's too tight. Even if you use two hands and you pulled it out and it just becomes a slip knot, which is a very easy knot, very simple, it's an issue. You have to just loosen it and take it off your head. So
I think that's Durabanan. I'm telling you the criterion for the Deraisa, and that's one of the things about a bow knot, right? That by pulling with one hand, you undo it very easily.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But in halacha, as I've told you, I'm not trained in halacha, so I hope that I got that right. Yeah.
So, why do some Chassidim like have what seems to be strange zmanim for tefillah, and like do they make Kriya Shema if they have a 10:30 chakras or?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I know that someone came to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, so it was out of the Rocha, with questions on the Amshin of a Rebbe of that time. So it was out of the Rocha. His times, the times that he davens, he can be davening Shabbos on Tuesday, and so Shlomo Zalman just says, I know a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Aveira goreris Aveira. What else does he do wrong? One transgression brings in its way another transgression. So if this is what he's doing wrong, he must be doing something else wrong also. Is there anything else that he does wrong? No? Then, no. It was like, wake up. You're not talking to a trivial person, to a person whose whole life is that. Yes, he's doing something that's very strange. That's right. It is very strange. I don't know the explanation for it, but at a certain point, you say, I remember when I was asking a brisker what they do on Rosh Hashanah, because to eat before Tekiyas is a problem, and the Tekiyas could take it till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then you get weak and so forth and so on, and you have to make Kiddush. So there are lots of different customs how to do it. So he told me what they do. I don't remember what it was. I said, why? He said, to tell you the truth, that's what the Rav did in Brisk in Europe. That's what we do. I said, that's the right answer. That's what the right answer. That's right. That's what the Rebbe did. We trust him. He knew everything. He was a gigantic genius. He spent his whole life serving Kodesh Baruch Hu. If he did it, there's got to be a good explanation. I follow it, even if I don't have a good explanation. That's the right answer. I'm speaking as a chassid. I think that's gold. Coming from a brisker, I was very happy. Instead of pretending that you have everything figured out. Okay.